Simple and compound interest, or simple versus compound interest. Let's talk about these two types of interest and how we can calculate these. Let's look at this word problem. Each year, Mr. Foster deposits $150 in a savings account that earns simple interest at an annual rate of 3%. Every year is 3%. He makes no other deposits or withdrawals, so I don't put any more money into the bank or take any more money out of the bank. I just leave it like it is. How much interest does his account earn after 1 year, after 2 years, after 5 years? So if you don't remember interest is, in this case, the bank actually pays me a little bit of money, 3% every year, for having my money in a savings account in the bank. They want the money in the bank, and so to do that, they pay a percentage on that. So in this case, I would make just a little bit of money every year as interest for having money in a savings account. You can also, companies, banks, or like credit cards also charge interest for letting people borrow money. So until the money is paid back, they charge a little bit extra, a percentage on top of that for letting someone borrow the money, and then that's how they get revenue in banks or in credit cards. So I'm going to deposit this money right here. We first need to know what simple interest is. So simple interest is interest that is paid only on the principal. So principal, that's interesting. What does principal mean? That's important to know if we're going to kind of move forward here. So principal is the starting amount that is put into an account or loaned out to an individual. So what that means is this. If I open that savings account, if I put that money in there, let's go back a little bit, sorry. If I put $150 in there, then that is my initial amount. That's my principal. That's what I start with. So that money is referred to as the principal. That's the beginning amount. So simple interest is interest that is just paid towards that. If I put $150 in there, I'm going to get a percentage of having that in the bank every year. So there is a formula for calculating simple interest, and it's interest equals P times R times T, and you'll have this on a formula chart, but you're going to want to write this down. The I is interest, P is the principal, which we just talked about. The R is the rate per year, so that the percentage that they give you, and you always want to turn it into a decimal. And then T is going to stand for time. How much time is that going by? Is it 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? How long are we wanting to calculate that interest for? So let's go back to our word problem here. So we know that I start with my initial amount, which is 150. So I'm going to set up my formula. My interest equals my principal. My principal is what I start with, $150. And I'm going to do that times, I'm going to use the dots here, 150 times the rate. The rate is 3%. So I'm going to turn that into a decimal. And so if we turn 3% into a decimal, remember we moved the decimal back 2 places, and it's going to be 0.03 or 0.03. And we're going to multiply this by the time. So they actually ask us to solve for a couple things here. But let's just figure out after 1 year. After 1 year, how much interest would I earn? So I'll just put a 1 here. So now what we need to do is just multiply this out, and we should be able to get our answer. So interest equals, and let's knock it out over here. I got 150, switch to purple here, 150, and I'm going to multiply it by that 0.03 to start with, 0.03. Remember when we multiplied decimals? To move the decimal over 2 places, keep our place value. Let's multiply this out. 3 times 0, 0. 3 times 5 is 15. I'm going to carry the 1. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. I cancel the 3 out and put my 0 in, and then the rest of this is going to be 0. 0 times 0 gets me 0. 0 times 5 is 0, and 0 times 1. To add this up, I get 0, 5, 4, and then I move my decimal point back 2 places, and I get 450. So interest equals right now 450, and this won't be too hard, times 1, which we all know will stay the same. So for 1 year, the interest is going to equal $4.50. So I'm going to start with $150, and just for having my money in the bank, I'm going to get an additional $4.50 at the end of 1 year. So I'll basically have $154.50 after 1 year just for having my money in the bank. So that's after 1 year. If I wanted to solve this for, sorry, I went too far there. If I wanted to solve this for what it says there, 2 years or 5 years, all I have to do is just change this 1 right here to those different numbers. So if I want to change it for, let's do the long one, let's do 5. Then all I need to do is put a 5 here. And I'm still going to keep my 450. Sorry, I had the eraser on. I'm still going to keep the 4.50 right over there. But now I just multiply it times 5. So 4.50 times 5 to get what I need to get. So that's 2 places there. 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 5 is 25. Carry the 2. That's 5 times 4 is 20 plus 2 is 22. And then I'm going to bring the decimal back 2 places. So after 5 years, multiplying this by 5, I'm going to earn $22.50 like that. And so, total amount, if I started with my 150, I added $22.50 to that, I'd end up getting basically $172.50. So this is how we can solve for simple interest. It's just interest on the principal. So let's look at compound interest. This is a bit more complicated. So compound interest refers to earned interest on the original investment, so that's the principal, like the $150, plus any previously earned interest. So most savings accounts are set up with compound interest. If you open a savings account, you want to have compound interest most of the time because you'll see when we start calculating, but you actually start earning. You can earn a little bit more for having it because each year you get the interest. They go ahead and the compound interest means you add the interest to your next interest calculation. So there is a formula for that. It's, like I said, a little bit more complicated, but we'll work with it here in practice and we'll get it. So make sure you have it down. It's the A equals, which is basically our compound interest, the principal, and then it says 1 plus R, which is going to be the rate, and then they put time, and time we're going to use kind of like an exponent. So that's what makes this a little bit tricky. So let's try practice. Mr. Fischel saves $500 each year in an account earning interest at an annual rate of 4% compounded annually. Okay. How much interest will the account earn at the end of 2 years? So he saves $500 each year at an account compounded by 4% annually. So let's go to our formula here. I think I have it down there, and let's fill this in. So the A is what we're solving for. That is our compound interest. The principal, what do we start with? We start with, or Mr. Fischel here, starts with $500. And then we go into our parentheses. We're going to put a 1, and the 1 is just because this will help us add this correctly and get us to the right part of our formula. So 1 plus, the rate is the percent, which is 4%, which we need to turn in to a decimal. And remember, when we have 4% turned to a decimal, that's bringing it back 2 places, so plus 0.04. And then the tricky part, of course, is this t right over here that we have. So the t is time, and we're going to do it in an exponent. Well, they want to know how much interest will be in the account at the end of 2 years. So we'll have a little 2 there. That's not as little as we need, but an exponent of like a 2 to solve this. So the tricky part can be if you want to solve for 10 or 8 or 12 years, that exponent gets really high, and that can make this really, really complicated. We probably won't get that far, but you just want to know how to set it up to begin with. So now we can solve this. So I'm going to keep the 500. My PEMDAS, I'm going to add inside the parentheses. 1 plus 1.04 should get me 1.04. I just added those two together right there. and then I'm going to keep my squared. Okay, so my next step is that I'm going to go ahead and square this. So I'm going to do 500, keep my parentheses. So remember, to square it, this doesn't mean I do 1.04 times 2. It means I do 1.04 times 1.04 when we square this thing out. So to do this, we're moving 2 spaces here, 2 spaces here, and we're going to multiply. 4 times 4 is 16. I'm going to carry the 1. 4 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1, and 4 times 1 is 4. I'm going to place a 0. 0 is going to be the rest of 0 times 4, 0 times 0, 0 times 1. Gives me 2 zeros. And now I have 1 times 4 there. Finish that out. 1 times 0 is 0, and 1 times 1 is 1. So I'm going to add this up, and I should have successfully squared this. 6, 1, 8, 0, 1. But the real important thing is to bring my decimals back 1, 2, 3, 4 places. And I can kind of round this out. It's 1.0816, which is kind of large. I could probably just do this as 1.08 and just leave it like that, 1.08. There's a 1 here, so I can just leave it like it is. So my last step is just to take 500 and multiply it by 1.08 to get my answer here for the compound interest. So I'm going to do that real quick. 100, you can work ahead of me if you want, but times 1.08. Remember, we're solving for 2 years. So I'm going to move this here, and we're going to multiply. 8 times 0 is 0, 8 times 0 is 0, 8 times 5 is 40. I'm going to put a 0 down. I'm going to get a row of zeros here. 0 there, 0 there. 1 times 0 is 0, 1 times 0 is 0, 1 times 5 is 5. So I get 0, 0, 0, 4, 5. So here's what this tells me, and I know I need to come back 2 spaces, 1, 2, and I'm getting A equals, put my money sign here, $540. So after 2 years, my initial amount was 500, or Mr. Fischel's went up to 540. So he actually gained $40 in interest, compounded interest, for having that money in the bank. So it went from 500 to 540. So how much interest will the account earn at the end? The account will actually earn $40. The total amount in the account is $540. I'll kind of write it out for you. But remember, we started, or Mr. Fischel started with the 500. So how much did it earn? You just subtract that. It earned $40. So that's how much interest it earned in 2 years. So try this one real quick. You can pause the video. You can do this practice one on your own. Sarah deposited $500 in a savings account that earned interest at a rate of 6% compounded annually. What will be the total amount in Sarah's savings account after 3 years? Give it a shot and see how you do. Okay, so this is what I got here. We want to see in 3 years what will be the compounded interest here, compound interest. So did 500, added right here the 1 plus 0.06, turning it to a decimal. I got 1.06. Needed to multiply it, actually cube it by itself, and that's this right here. That's that whole section. That's the way I did it, and then I did some rounding. To make it all short, I ended up getting 1.19 when I cubed 1.06. And then I multiplied that by 500 to get 595. So what will be the total amount in savings account at the end of 3 years? $595.